Hey guys, welcome back here to the Fishing Teacher, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to spend some time with me. And guys, today I want to have a conversation how experienced bass anglers, they see the water differently than like people starting out or just even average bass anglers. There's a perception and an awareness as far as that you gain on the water with experience that allows you just to, it's almost like there's a whole new world out there that unfolds once you know what to look for. So this is one of those videos, I'll tell you something right now, guys. This is one of those videos that helps you gain your fishing success in leaps and bounds. It's like a lot of the videos I do with, like, you know, lures and techniques and that type of stuff, they're very important, don't get me wrong, they help your fishing, but the level of how you grow successfully as a bass angler, that's a slower way of growth versus these topics like I'm talking about today that have to do with how you approach to find fish, how you look, you know, at a body of water, how you differentiate, good areas and bad areas. It's a mix of it all. It's like you got to have a little bit of both. You have to have a bait awareness. You got to understand color, lure retrieve, casting angles, and all that. But there's a thing about when you get on the water, there's something about experience is just it's irreplaceable, because a lot of times experience comes, the success that you have with experience in bass fishing comes from reproducible results. And those reproducible results take time. They take time to formulate, because every season's different, every month's different, every condition's different. So definitely it's going to be a good info-packed video here today. Also, guys, for get started, a couple quick things. Just want to invite everybody to please check out my tackle warehouse link, guys, in the description of this video. We got springs right around the corner, man. If you want to get stocked up with tackle, using that tackle warehouse link in my description is a great way to support the Fishing Teacher. Really appreciate that. Also, guys, thank you for everybody that subscribed, members, all that. And finally, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, jerkbait fishing is really good right now in the Ozarks here. If you want to learn how to fish a jerkbait, there's not a better time. Shoot me a private message on my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, for details there. So appreciate that. Okay, how do experienced anglers see a body of water differently than somebody that, doesn't know much about fishing? This is one of the things that I sort of take for granted, because it's a slow process. As far as the learning process and your awareness on the water has a lot to do with how long you've been fishing. And let me give you some examples. I'll use myself as an example. I'm a student of the sport like you guys are. I don't claim to know everything, but I've got a lot of fishing experience. I've got a lot of experience from failures and success both that I share on the channel here. And I don't claim to know everything. I don't want to know everything. I want that mystery to be out there. But I do know some things that I have gained from my experience that allows me to see things on the water that a lot of people can't. Okay, so first of all, here's one thing that an experienced angler notices that a lot of average anglers don't, and that is subtle changes in water clarity. It may even be big changes a lot of people don't realize. But water clarity changes throughout the lake. If you go out on the main lake, down on the lower end of the lake, your water clarity is going to be different than if you go up in a creek arm in the mid part of the lake, or on the upper river part of the lake. There's going to be variations in that water clarity. And usually what happens is this water clarity variation is very subtle and it happens very slow. But an experienced angler notices that. It's like, as soon as you put your bait in the water, you will notice there's a little bit different water clarity. It might not be noticeable at all, to most people, but an experienced angler can pick that up really quick. And they usually pick it up on how their bait looks in the water, how the bait glows, or how much it stands out, or how much it blends in. That's one of the big ways that you determine that. And one of the reasons this is really important is the fact that it allows you to change lure color and lure profiles and even categories. A radical water clarity change may dictate the difference between going to a spinnerbait or a shaky head. So that's one of the things that you really need, that experienced anglers can see more than average anglers, is water clarity variations. And it's all about being aware. And that's the thing about bass fishing. It's like you have to have all of your sensories opened up in order to really maximize your success on the water. But that is going to be one thing with that. Next thing, a lot of experienced anglers will notice, a lot of people don't, is different changes in wind speed and wind direction throughout the course of the day. Now this is very important because a lot of times certain bites, certain techniques or patterns you get on is very wind dependent. Now that wind can be dependent upon not having any wind, or having a little bit of wind, or having a lot of wind. And one of the things an experienced angler notices that an average angler doesn't is how the wind is hitting a certain bank and the angle that wind is hitting a certain bank. And the angle that wind is hitting the bank has a lot to do with your approach, how you want to position your boat, and your casting angles. It may have a lot to do with your lure selection that you have. But pay close attention. That's another thing that you can do with it, is certain banks catch wind different than other banks. And pay close attention to wind speed changes throughout the day, because a lot of times just a little bit of wind change makes a big difference. Let's say, for example, with a topwater lure. In a topwater lure, like if I'm fishing a walking topwater or something like that, I don't want hardly any wind. I want almost like a calm, surface to the water. But if I'm fishing a bait like a buzz bait or a whopper plopper, something that's a little bit more aggressive, then I may want just a little bit of chop. And sometimes that makes all the difference in the world as far as catching one or not. Okay, another thing with that is a lot of anglers out there that are experienced, they understand how weather patterns affect bass movement and positioning and their mood and their personality. Now, when I talk about weather patterns, I'm talking about like different types of cloud cover, the different types of clouds. Like right now you can see in the sky here, these are those wispy cirrus clouds, partly cloudy. It's about 50% coverage with the cirrus clouds, but some days you may have a cumulus cloud and the light intensity may be a little bit different. You may have 75% overcast, or you may have bright sunny days, or you may have cloudy days, you may have rainy days. And then on top of that, the angle of the sun at certain times of the year is also going to affect the light intensity. So the main thing with that is, guys, pay close attention to your cloud cover and your light intensity. All you guys that watch all three of my channels, you hear me talking about light intensity all the time, because light intensity is one thing that an experienced angler really understands, that it's super important to pick out the right technique and the right lure category, the right lure size, and the right lure color. So that's another big thing to remember. Another thing that experienced anglers do that a lot of people don't pick up on is they're aware of other anglers on the water and the fishing pressure in a lake. Now, say for example, if you're going down the lake and you see somebody fishing down a bank, an experienced angler can look at that person and see the technique that you're fishing, whether it be a jig or a crankbait or something like that. And they will either determine if they want to fish that bank after that person left, or maybe come down that bank with a different technique or a different lure. I always pay attention to other anglers on the water, because I don't want to, if I see somebody working like a snail down a bank, say for example there's a bunch of docks or something, or lay down trees, and I see somebody working super slow like with a jig or a worm, I know I'm not going to be able to come back in there behind that person with a jig or a worm and catch any fish. So I really pay attention to, the traffic flow on a lake, how much pressure areas are getting. And that's another thing that you can be aware of, is certain areas of the lake will attract more pressure than other areas of the lake. The areas of the lake that attract the most pressure generally are the major creek arms in the lake. Those are the ones. And then structures, like the obvious structures like main lake and secondary points, boat docks, all the visible cover gets a lot of pressure with that. And there, guys, this goes on and on. We could talk for hours about this, as far as, just things that experienced anglers are more aware about that other anglers aren't. But, for the sake of keeping the video short, I want to cut it off with this. But that's just a few, guys. That's just a few off the top of my mind. But main thing is just try to be aware when you're out fishing. Try to be aware of everything that goes on. One of the things that I'll leave you with this tip here is, the next time you're out fishing and the first bass that you catch of the day, just chill out for a second after you catch that bass and analyze and think about everything that surrounded that catch. It's like, how were you working your lure? What was the speed of retrieve? What was the cadence? What's the color of the lure? How close was the lure to the cover you were throwing to? What was the wind speed or the wind direction? What was the light intensity or the sunlight angle? try to assimilate as much information as you can around that one catch, even where the bass was hooked at in the mouth, and that leads you to your next fish a lot easier. So anyway, guys, hope that helps out. We'll check in later.